the gun. Manning lets it fly. It's caught by Thomas. There's the record for Peyton Manning.
Saludos and salutations, Broncos country, and welcome to another exciting episode of Broncos Talk. I'm your host, Adan Diaz, and joining me, as always, to my right is my co-host of Broncos Talk at Richie. Richie, how you doing tonight, my friend?
Not bad. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, Rich, and we have lots to talk about on today's show. But guys, before we get into anything topic, let me just give you guys the rundown. If this is your very first time listening or watching us for your very first time, welcome aboard. It doesn't matter if it's your first time or if you're a seasoned vet and you've been with us since the very beginning. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And if you like the content that Rich and I put out, or anybody on this network, on the MHRT Network puts out, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to get live notifications whenever any one of our shows goes live. Always remember that Broncos Talk goes live every single Tuesday at 7654, which goes the same on Thursdays for our podcast show, the MHRT podcast. It's the flagship show. And, of course, we have the Nothing Rhymes with our good friends Johnny and Isaiah, which goes live every Friday at 7654. And we also have the pregame show, The Neighborhood, which goes live just before every single Broncos game. And, folks, we are down to the last four Broncos games, so you don't want to miss out. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait until next season to get some more of the great pregame show content that we put out for you guys. So, like I said, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe. Tell your friends, tell anybody that's a Broncos fan that we are here to talk about Broncos 24 hours a day, even if we're not live. But before we continue, guys, Rich and I would kind of, before we start talking about the great game we had last week, tragedy struck Broncos country last week when they lost 33-year-old Damaris Thomas. He unfortunately had a medical issue in his home. And unfortunately, nobody was able to get to his aid in time, and he unfortunately passed away. So before the show, Richie and I talked about kind of like I suggested that we would talk about the very first time we saw Damaris Thomas. And for me, I don't remember if it's the very first time, but I remember it was my birthday, and I was at a restaurant celebrating my birthday, and it was the wild card game, and it's the play that pretty much put Damaris Thomas' name on the map, which was that wonderful pass from Tim Tebow, and Damaris Thomas just caught it on a slant route and just ran all the way to the end zone with it. And I was so happy that I almost jumped up and I almost flipped the table I was on because I was so excited that not only was it my birthday, but my favorite football team was going to the second round of the playoffs. And even though it was New England and things didn't look good, I didn't really care. I was just so happy that, that Elway coming in his first year as GM was starting to build what looked to be a very promising future in Denver. So, Rich, I turn it over to you. I just want to thank Damaris for his time here in Denver. I was really glad that the very first Broncos game I went to go see was in 2018. I uploaded a video on my Instagram. Some of you guys saw it on Twitter. Unfortunately, he wasn't in a Broncos uniform. He had just gotten traded to Houston, but I was able to say that I got to see Damaris Thomas play in person, even if he wasn't a Bronco.
Right. So I guess for me, it was probably back. It was either his rookie or second year in the league, somewhere in that range there. And it was right when we were starting to run more bubble screens. Mm-hmm. And DT really was, in my opinion, one of the elite wide receivers at the bubble screen, particularly earlier in his career. DT had a really unique kind of mix and match. Him and Julio Jones and AJ Green were kind of the three wide receivers that were similar in some respects. Each of them had their own little unique kind of quirks and stuff that kind of made them different, but they are all very, very similar. But what DT had going for him was he was larger than all of them, and he had speed that can match each of them as well. And it really set him apart. And you saw those bubble screens, and there was one play, Can't remember what team it was against. I just remember it where it was on the right-hand side of the field. DT caught a bubble screen, and you got your first taste of what a unique player he was when you saw a defender that you thought was going to basically have him dead to rights, and he just shot up the field, and then the defender went to tackle him and caught nothing but air. And to me, that's when I first realized that DT was going to be a special player for the Denver Broncos. And then shortly thereafter, then you saw the play that you remember with the Tebow to Damaris kind of play that will kind of live on in infamy. I mean, it's making almost every NFL highlight, even before his untimely passing. And just on behalf of myself, and I know that you concur with this, our condolences to Damaris Thomas and his family. Just a class act by all accounts. Obviously, I've never met him, but all accounts that I've ever heard about him have been just an absolute classy guy, and gone too soon at the age of 33.
Yeah, and it kind of just reminds you that if you ever got to meet the man, just consider yourself very lucky, because you got to meet one of the most humble human beings to have ever graced a Broncos uniform. And even outside of the field, Rich, I mean, there's stories from people all around the NFL, fans that have met him, that they just remember him for being such just a wonderful man. So, if it's okay with you, Rich, I'd like to propose a toast in his memory. So tonight's episode, we're dedicating it to the memory of Damaris Thomas. May he rest in peace. And believe me, your legacy is going to live on forever, my friend. So,
and just one other thing that I really, really respected DT even more than I already did. There was I guess a director within one of the charities within Denver, like Denver proper. And one thing that she mentioned was that DT would often show up on his own time. No cameras, no publicity, no beat writer or whatever sitting outside trying to, jot down notes to say he was here. He would simply just show up, give his time to the charity, and more importantly, the kids of Denver. And I think that just says a lot about who he was as a person. And I did mention this in the comments of the pregame show, as well as Nothing Rhymes briefly there, which was, I wonder if part of his upbringing, where he had role models within the sports world that he saw that type of behavior from, and that helped shape him a little bit. We'll obviously never know, because we won't be able to get his direct take on that unless he's already spoken to that in previous interviews, obviously. But I do wonder if stuff like that are things that he remembers as a childhood growing up, and seeing that as something that he personally wanted to strive for as well. And that's why he was that type of person, because he felt that he might be able to inspire someone else just like him to walk a straight path to success and end up growing as a person and becoming a better person, just for having someone like DT spend what I'm sure he felt was no skin off of his back, an absolute must for the community. And if it helps a kid, any kid, multiple kids go and live a better life, then why not? And I absolutely love that kind of charity work.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you there, brother. But going forward, guys, I believe that, sometimes in tragedy, we kind of have to find a shining light. And I believe that the Broncos, not just the organization, but the entire team, even though they went out there with their hearts full, and, they didn't let that get to them. They kind of used DT's energy, and, Broncos country, I'd like to personally thank all the fans that went out there, that were at the game, that had on their 88 jerseys. I know right now the Damaris Thomas jersey is the #1 selling Broncos jersey in the NFL right now. So it's really great to hear. And even if you couldn't make it to the game, like myself and like Rich, if you had something on that had his name or his number, just in memory, I'm pretty sure he would appreciate it. And it was just, it was great. because not only were the Broncos going into this game with emotion, so were the Lions, because they had just won their very first game last week against the Vikings. So it was just a clash of emotion against emotion. But Rich, one thing we love to do here on Broncos Talk is just whenever we get a win, we always have to address it, right? So how about them Broncos, baby? Woo! Broncos won 33-10. Was it, Rich? 30, I believe it was
38 to 10.
38-10. Okay. So I was
38 to
close.
17.
Something. No, it was 10. I know it's 10. I don't have my notes with me. I lost them. But it just felt great to see the Broncos win a game, and basically the Teddy Bridgewater that we saw, 38-10. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Pretty much the Teddy Bridgewater that we saw falter and kind of just discombobulate against Kansas City, we didn't really see that Teddy Bridgewater this time around. ZW Designs, welcome, my friend. Thank you so much for coming out to the show. And Johnny Baki here with a question for us. Do you think, well, two questions, really. It's a two-part question. Do you think, number one, DT will be inducted into the Hall of Fame? And number two, 88 will be retired in Denver? His induction into the Hall of Fame, I think I would say 50% yes, just for the simple fact that I don't like, in order to get into the Hall of Fame, especially now, with the exception of Calvin Johnson, I do believe that you kind of do need a little bit more. Don't get me wrong. Demaryius Thomas in Denver, Ring of Fame, hands down, he's got it. And the 88, I would love to see that number being retired in Denver as well. But in order to be a ballot Hall of Famer, I feel like their standards are kind of like really high. Like I don't really know what they are, but I believe that his name, Demaryius Thomas' name, will be shown on the ballot many more times, and that he'll probably be snuffed. But on that regard, I do hope that I'm wrong, and I do hope that he does become a Hall of Famer, because that man deserved it. Unfortunately, it sucks that the Broncos cut him and that he had to go and and he had small stints in Houston and then the Jets and then with New England. But if anybody, whenever they hear Demaryius Thomas' name, all his highlights, all his Super Bowl victory, all that stuff will always be when he was wearing the orange and blue and he was representing the Broncos organization. So, Rich, I turn it over to you.
So I'm going to answer number two first. My understanding is those talks were already in place. So I think that is, I mean, and especially now, I think that's effectively a given and a likely scenario. With regards to the Hall of Fame, I fear that you're going to end up with a little bit of let's just put it this way. We have some of the top 5 wide receivers that are still not in the Hall of Fame. And part of it is because they may have played for teams that were not necessarily as popular, but they had the stats that they should be getting into the Hall. And I think that I heard, I can't remember who it was. I want to say that it was one of the former wide receivers who's kind of like at a Michael Irvin or someone in that kind of caliber of wide receiver that said DT's problem is that he just didn't quite play long enough at a high enough level with good enough quarterbacks. So he's going to be a little bit, I think, of a Terrell Davis situation where when DT had his stretch with those 4 years with Peyton Manning, when you look at his career, he was a monster in terms of stats. He was just absolutely on fire. And if the Hall and the voters and the fans want to look at it in terms of, can your name be mentioned or is there place? I think DT might be a 3 or 4 ballot type guy in terms of taking those votes, kind of like a Terrell Davis was. Like I think he was like 3 ballots, I think, before he got in, where he was just seen as such a dominant player for such like that small stretch in his career that they just couldn't deny him getting into the Hall. I wonder if DT might be similar, but ultimately the wide receiver position, they're looking for both longevity and stats. So I would not be surprised if they don't get him in.
Yeah. But going back to what Rich and I were initially talking about, which is the game, kudos to Dan Campbell for not accepting that flag on the very first play. And also the Broncos organization. Thank you guys so much for just scraping all of that together at in such short notice. It was great to see the sheriff was out there with his family. They were paying tribute. The number 88 painted on the field, and it just felt great. And even though, like I said earlier, the Broncos went in there with their hearts heavy, I guess I should say initially, they didn't let that get the best of them. They didn't let the emotion bring them down. They actually used that to power themselves forward for a victory. Now, one thing that I've been hearing for the last 2 days is that that it was the Lions. So it should have been nothing to, like it was no competition or whatever. But I wholeheartedly disagree with that statement, Rich, because even though the Lions aren't playing their best football physically, the Lions have played almost every single game to the best of their abilities emotionally. And I can think of 2 or 3 games that in their season they should have won. But unfortunately, they just couldn't. And you count 4. And I'm pretty sure if you ask my brother, he'll probably tell you 5 or 6. But they
no bias there, right?
Yeah, no bias there. That's the straight honest truth. But unfortunately, and it almost became close because it was almost a point where the Lions were just behind the Broncos by 4 points. So, it started kind of iffy, but thankfully the offense started getting going, and the defense started to kind of buckle down, and they started to get pressure on Jared Goff. So, Rich, in this game, even though both teams went in there emotionally, fired up, I do believe that the Broncos went in there with a lot more to, I wouldn't say to prove, but I just said that they were more hungry for the win, and it showed in their play. I mean, the only part, and we'll get to this later on the Mile High Mountain segment, was just probably special teams that, played anything, I guess you could say lackluster at best. But our running backs were great. Our wide receivers were not the best, but they weren't bad either. And like I said at the beginning of the show, Rich, Teddy Bridgewater played a really good game. No interceptions, and he was able to, read the defense a little bit better than he did last week against the Chiefs.
So I've been saying pretty much since we started the show, it's important to have a proper pass protection offensive line. The Lions, as our Hot 5 guest said in last week's podcast, if you have not checked that out, I highly encourage you check that out. Our Hot 5 guest, Jeff, indicated to us that the Lions have really struggled with a lot of their defensive line pressures and sacks and that kind of stuff this year. So we saw a lot of mediocre pressure. There was some pressure, but mediocre pressure, although we did have some edge pressure on both the left and right side of the line. Both tackles had some challenges this past game, but ultimately the center part of the pocket, our interior, generally speaking, did okay, with the exception Cushenberry had some issues as well. But overall, they held up enough to give Teddy a clean enough pocket where he didn't feel like he was going to get killed. And we saw what you can have, or what Teddy can do when he feels that he's not going to get absolutely just beaten up badly. And that was a game like we had there. I do also want to comment back on the very first thing you started saying there. For those of you who didn't see it, I highly recommend going back and watching Vic Fangio's presser after the game, the one immediately after, where he went into some of the details in terms of some of the stuff that was done and said, etc. I really just want to give credit to the Ford family, as well as Dan Campbell, for just being yet again unbelievably classy as an organization. Fangio and the Denver Broncos had reached out to both the officiating crew and the Lions organization to indicate to them what they were going to do not long before the game in terms of what happened and how they're going to run that play and kind of have a bit of a tribute play at the beginning of the game to Damaris Thomas. I believe it was Tim Patrick's idea to have that type of a play there where the main receiver in Sutton would be go over to the 88-yard line, kneel, and then they would end up with 10 men on the field in honor of Damaris Thomas. And everyone collectively agreed that the penalty was going to be waived, and that apparently was no hesitation on behalf of the Detroit Lions. So as Broncos fans, I just think we owe it to the Detroit Lions and that organization to just say, I give a round of applause for just being an absolute class act organization and doing that sort of thing, because not every team would have done that. I can think of a few that probably wouldn't have. And I really just think that the Lions showed just an unbelievable level of class in that game and how they handled that situation. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. And you know what, Rich? I was actually rewatching the highlights before we went live, and on the play where the Lions scored, it was actually a really well thought of play. If you watch it, Khalif Raymond he runs his motion towards Goff. He stops and then pinpoints back to where he was originally running on a slant, kind of like a slant backwards. And Goff has in the ball, and Raymond was what just basically went in uncovered, because whoever it was whose job it was to kind of cover him, I kind of lost him in the shuffle there. I don't know if it was man coverage or if it was just miscommunication or what have you, but Raymond was so fast that when you watch that play in regular motion, it happens so fast. But when you watch it in slow motion, I mean, it's like really good. So, again, it's one of those tricky Anthony Lynn scheme plays that he used to run when he was with the Chargers. And thankfully, Rich, that was the only time the Lions were able to score a touchdown. I mean, they did get that field goal later on, but after that, the Lions just fell behind even more and more and more. They just couldn't keep up with that offense. So, but defensively, Rich, I think that the defense played a really great game out there. I mean, our front defensive line, I know me and you have kind of we've been tough on them in terms of, not being able to get pressure and get to the quarterback as much as we'd like. But Shelby Harris had a batted pass. DreMont Jones, I believe, had 2 sacks on the day. And also, he had 2 sacks. He also had a batted pass. And obviously that beautiful interception from Justin Simmons. I mean, talk about jumping the route. The man just flew in front of the wide receiver and caught the ball, landed in bounds, and still was able. Luckily, he was next to the number 88 on the ground, and he was able to go and pay homage to Damaris Thomas. So it was a great game played all around here, Rich.
Yeah.
So I guess my question to you is, where did you think the stronger side for this Broncos game was? Do you think it was offensively or defensively?
Defensively. I believe that a lot of our offense sprung from the high quality defense that we put on the field. So, for example, when we came into the halfway mark, our offense has started to sputter. We were not doing particularly well on offense, even though our running game was doing well. So I'm looking at my notes here, and the problem that we ran into, in my opinion, in the latter half of the latter half of the second quarter, so the back end of the first half there, it's almost like we wanted to stop running the ball and we wanted to start passing the ball more. And I don't think that was the right decision. I realized that we paid 2 great wide receivers, or wide receivers that we certainly like here in Broncos country. And just because you pay wide receivers that are, fit maybe what you want to do going forward, or might look, looking ahead would certainly help. For example, a younger quarterback, if that's the option we choose to go in the offseason, which seems to be a bit of a polling favorite amongst many. Why walk away from what has clearly been working all game? It makes no sense. So what was happening, and that actually allowed the Lions to get back into the game. We started passing the ball, they started stopping the pass, and then we started to have issues there, and they made it a 4-point game. You mentioned that even earlier in the podcast, just a few moments ago. And then we had the turnover in the very beginning. Remember that early part of the first drive for the Lions where we had that turnover? Mm-hmm. That was as a result of the defense. That was not an offensive thing. And then our offense was then able to get a short field and capitalize on it. So we had a few of those types of things where our defense stepped it up and gave our offense short fields. That helps a lot.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you too. I think that the Broncos won this game thanks to their defense. And as Steve mentioned in the comment here, it was basically points off turnovers. The defense was able to give the ball back to our Broncos offense in really good field position most of the time. And the running game actually went out and did what they were supposed to do. Using Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon as a 1-2 punch in that way was just, it was a thing of beauty. Now, the only drawback from it is unfortunately, you're not paying your running backs as much money to catch the ball or run the ball as you are the wide receivers. So when you're not using guys like Tim Patrick and Courtland Sutton to the best of their ability, but I mean, obviously you got to do one of two things. If you're going to run the ball, obviously like New England did against Buffalo last week, but that was because of weather. Either way, you're going to run the ball until they start stacking the box and they find a way to stop you, then you change it. But
Right.
This way around, but then again, the Bridgewater didn't hand off the ball every single play here, Rich. I'm just saying that the running plays were outnumbered the passing plays, which is fine by me. It wasn't because they were afraid to throw the ball. It was just because the Lions defense was unable to stop the run. And, granted, the Lions did have a couple of players down going into this game because of COVID, and some of them were battling the flu. But this is the NFL, Rich, and it's a next man up league. So, there's no like asterisk win or asterisk lost. You gotta play with what you got, and you gotta do your best. So, unfortunately, that's just how it is. But it does, and here we are again, Rich. Just like after the Chargers win, the Broncos are all hyped up. They're all, emotionally just pumped up, so to speak. And going into this next coming game, Rich, we have to make sure that we go into this next game with the same mentality, and that we don't backtrack like we've been doing. Going from hot to cold, hot to cold, hot to cold, every week in and week out.
Right. So I mean, we ran the ball an awful lot in that first quarter, especially after the first few scripted plays where there was a bit more of a mix, but generally speaking, we ran the ball quite a bit. And then in the second quarter, we tried to pass the ball a lot more. That didn't work particularly well. And then in the second half, we started to go far more heavy tight end style sets. And then we started to see some really big runs break out. We started to wear down the Lions, that sort of thing. And if I can just kind of touch base on what you said earlier, yeah, I don't see this as an asterisk win, but at the same time, I think we do need to comment on what Mr. Johnny Baki said there. A few comments up further, is a little bit of the longer one there.
Mm-hmm.
We were going against a team rather that had 11 players for this upcoming game that were out due to either COVID or flu. On top of that, they had an additional 11 players in various roles, so some starters, some not, that were on IR as well. So if you're going to look at the totality of the Detroit Lions, there was 22 players that were on a combination of being sick and being on kind of the COVID list, or the short-term illness list, however you want to look at it. COVID season and flu season seem to coincide a little bit depending on where you are. So in Detroit, where it's cooler, those two kind of seem to line up, coincide with one another, and that seems to be a common theme. So not an asterisk win, but I think we also need to, as Broncos fans, say that was a game where we established who we can be. We established that we are a running team, and I hope Pat Shurmur got the memo, because Lord knows he certainly hasn't received it thus far. So I really hope he got the memo, and I hope that he realized that we are a run-first team this season until we start making changes on our offensive line to start improving pass protection. That being said, I think the fact that we play in Denver for half the season in terms of home games, that I actually think we should retain our run game first, or run first status, because our home field advantage, being at Mile High, is the thin air. Running the ball helps wear down the opposing teams. So I actually don't think we should change this identity. My only point is that if we want to try and be that high-powered offense, if that's what the ultimate goal is, which I don't agree with, but if that's what we want to be, then we're going to need to make some changes to improve our pass protection on the offensive line.
Yeah. And here's a question here for us, Rich, from our good friend Steve Sarkovich. I hope I didn't mispronounce your name there, my friend. He asks us, what is up with Sutton? Is it him, Teddy, or is it the scheme?
Love the question.
Yeah, I love the question here. So, Steve, I do know what you're talking about. And Unfortunately, I've been seeing Courtland Sutton's name being as a player to drop in a lot of fantasy lists because unfortunately, unfortunately, he hasn't been one of the most productive wide receivers in the league this year in terms of yardage. So if I have to be honest with you, Steve, I was gonna say Rich. If I'm being honest with you, Steve, I'm gonna say scheme because I don't believe the Pat Shurmur scheme is working as well as George Payton had thought. I'm pretty sure George Payton thought that bringing in a guy like Teddy Bridgewater and handing him the keys to the offense and saying, "Here, you're a veteran, you should know what to do. You've played under a Pat Shurmur like scheme before when you guys were in Minnesota. You'll figure it out." But unfortunately, we're heading into week 15 and nothing seems to have worked where it's a winning combination in terms of, Bridgewater not turning over the ball over. Now, Bridgewater's done a fantastic job not turning the ball over 15 times like he did last year when he was in Carolina. I think he only has 2, 3, or 4 interceptions on the season so far. So with the money that they just paid, so they signed Sutton and Tim Patrick to, we know that those two guys are going to be here next year. But it's starting to look like more than likely Bridgewater is not going to be with the Broncos next year, especially with a report that came out earlier, Rich, I think it was yesterday, the day before, where it's alleging that 7 interceptions. Thank you, boss. I thought it was 3 or 4. Where it's alleging that Bridgewater is looking for a $20-25 million type contract next year, and that he's pretty sure that the Broncos are not going to give him that type of money.
So I think it's a bit of a mix. So as I said earlier, our offensive line has not been particularly great in pass protection, and Shurmur's scheme wants both of those outside wide receivers in most cases to kind of run deeper. And that takes a lot longer of a time to develop as plays. And that's why you're seeing Teddy holding onto the ball for so long. That's why you're seeing him kind of linger in the pocket and that kind of stuff. So I think if Shurmur wanted to, he could tweak his scheme and modify it, but he's just not doing it. So I think ultimately this falls on Shurmur for not making the offensive modifications given the offensive line that he has in front of him. They are geared a little bit more towards running the ball, as we saw in the Lions. Like, they did a really great job running the ball, than they are pass protection. And if you have players that are geared for one thing versus the other, then you need to modify your passing game in order to fit the offensive line in terms of, and I say that in terms of protection for your quarterback, because Teddy requires the ability to plant his feet in order to get that zip on the ball, in order to get it down the field and throw it accurately. And if you have a pass pro breakdown on those long passing routes, you're just not going to get that. So part of it is Teddy, part of it is on player personnel. And as a result, ultimately it lies on Shurmur for not modifying his offensive scheme to fit the people that he has around him.
Johnny here with a comment towards your statement here, Rich. And he's saying, "What are you talking about, Rich? Teddy had the 5th most time to pass in the NFL. That is the dictionary definition of a great pass pro."
No, it's not. So if he had the 5th most time to throw, the other question is he getting hit as he's trying to throw it? Is he getting pressured as he's trying to throw it? And that also doesn't factor in the fact that he might be shimming and shaking in the pocket to try and extend the play to get away from rushers. So, for example, if you have pressure coming through the offensive line and it's coming and it's breaking the protection, Teddy's holding onto the ball, but he's running back and forth to try and evade the basically the offensive line breakdown or the protection breakdown that's in front of him. I think we're seeing more of that than the film is showing us, and I think the All-22 shows a little bit more of that as well when you look at both the left and right side. Now, I will also agree that it seems in recent weeks that Teddy is if I can kind of steal a term from Sam Darnold, seeing ghosts. There are some plays where the offensive line is actually holding, but he is breaking that interior kind of middle of the pocket, breaking out, running around, that sort of stuff when he doesn't need to. But overall, I think ultimately has come down to offensive line protection and him shimming and shaking and holding onto the ball for a little bit too long. and not throwing those anticipatory throws that we would like for a veteran quarterback to throw. We saw those with guys like Peyton Manning. We've seen those with like the Tom Brady's and Ben Roethlisberger's and less so with Patrick Mahomes. He likes to kind of just throw massive zips and stuff on the ball. But with the more veteran style quarterbacks, you start to see anticipatory throws. Teddy seems to throw more of them than Drew Lock, but certainly not enough of them to make up the difference in terms of protections, in my opinion.
Yeah. I so hard agree here, Rich. And there was a comment here that I wanted to highlight here for you, Rich, that I believe, if I can find it. Oh, here we go. That is a segue into the next part of our show, which is shout out to Garrett Bowles this season for not regressing. So I think that would be a nice segue into the next part of our show, Rich, if you know what I mean.
I do. As we all look up, we have our next segment, which is who fits on where on the Mile High Mountain.
See, I got the timing right this time. See, I told you I was going to work on it.
I tried to drag the last part just to give that extra little bit of oomph at the end. So
yeah, this new streaming platform, it takes a little, like a second or two more than our previous one. So the timings, I'm still working on it, but I believe I did it right. But guys, anyway, it's time for the Broncos Talk favorite part of our segment. Well, one of our favorite part of our segment, the Mile High Mountain. So I believe last week, Rich, I went first. So this week, I'll give you the honors.
Awesome. I just want to quickly touch on a quick comment earlier, EJ. Yes, Detroit is cooler, but not cold. I am about like 5 to 6 hours north of Detroit. So just based on physical location, where I live will always be colder than Detroit. So it is cooler, not cold. So my Mile High Mountain is Javonte Williams sitting at the summit. I have just been so impressed with him these past 2 weeks in particular, showing that progression that you want to see from that rookie running back. And the other thing that goes totally unnoticed, some of the announcers have mentioned the last 2 games or 3 games, his pass protection is also stellar, which you often see as being something that a lot of rookie running backs struggle with. I do believe that we as Broncos fans have not given enough credit to Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon has clearly shown that he is willing to help out a guy like Javonte Williams and our running backs coach, Modkins. Both of those guys have clearly done a stellar job in developing Javonte Williams. Pass protection and running the ball, amazing. My on the rise this week, and this may surprise those who have followed our podcast for a while, Justin Simmons. I actually thought that what I saw from the Detroit game may have actually well been Justin Simmons' best game as a Denver Bronco. He did some of the things that I had been wanting to see from Justin Simmons for a good number of weeks, if not the last couple of years. Justin Simmons was able to show coverage ability, which he has in some cases struggled with over the course of his career. And more importantly, he had a couple short but open field tackles that he actually made this game, which have been challenges for him in the past. So I just really want to give credit where credit is due. I was super happy with how he played overall. And with regards to that interception, I think one of the things that again, others have been really critical of him on, and I want to make sure that I kind of cover off what made that interception different from, say, some of the other ones that I have been less impressed with, which is he saw the play, read the play, and then jumped the route, like in that order. And you can see the processing kind of as that play was developing. And that's the type of thing that you want to see from a top-tier safety in the league, at least one that is getting paid like a top-tier safety in the league. And I think that he showed on that play in particular, that he kind of earned that salary for that game. And I just want to see him build on that. I want to see more of that type of play and less of some of the play, for example, like we saw versus Kansas City, where I have a few plays there that I was just shaking my head at when I saw him play. And credit where credit is due. My at the base camp was Garrett Bowles. I'm sorry for the previous comment there, but Garrett Bowles had some real challenges this game. He was getting beat, and there was multiple plays where the edges on the left tackle side there were rounding the corner, pushing him back, and we were frankly lucky that Teddy was able to plant his feet and make as many plays as he did. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that we ran the ball so much, so Teddy felt more comfortable. Specifically in the second half, where we started running heavier tight end sets. In the second half, we started having the tight ends bracket Bulls on the left-hand side, which also helped with protection. But when you watch the first half, Bulls really did struggle. And on the play drive home, this is the second week Deonte Spencer has made it to the bottom tier of my Mile High Mountain. And Glenn Hauser and I completely agree. For those of you who don't know Glenn, he is one of the staples on our flagship show, Mile High Roundtable, on Thursdays, 7 p.m. Eastern. And Deonte Spencer has really, really struggled in his return game, in my opinion. He's made some really, really bad decisions where he's ran inside where he should have ran out, or he should have jump cut around a guy and then ran upfield. Just overall, I expect more from a guy who is a return man only and has shown little to no productivity on the offensive side of the ball. In my opinion, at this stage of the season, we need to get a guy like Mike Boone back there as our return man, because I loved what I saw last week, not the Lions game, the game prior, from Mike Boone. I'd love to see him back there as our return guy.
Yeah, very well, good selections. And our good friend Mr. Boggins, who we haven't seen on the show in a while, asks us, who's Glenn? But when we talked about this earlier, Rich, our mountains kind of seemed the same. So I just want to make sure and reiterate to everybody that it's just a coincidence.
We actually don't talk before the show.
Not a lot. If we have enough time to jump on and kind of talk about stuff, we do, but it's not like, like a half hour or whatever. Most people think we do backstage. But anyways, for the top of my summit for me is obviously Javonte Williams. I mean, the man, while he might not win another scepter this week for Angry Run, I do believe that he more than made up for obviously Melvin Gordon going forward, he's going to be a bit of an issue because he does have a thumb injury. So while it's not nothing serious where he'll miss playing time, for a man who's known to kind of, to fumble the ball, knock on wood, hopefully that's not something where he, it keeps him from securing the ball and, him coughing it up as it goes forward. So hopefully it's nothing serious. But Javonte did a fantastic job, when he was called upon to get the ball where it needed to be. And he's going to be a star in this league. I know we say that a lot on the MHRT Network, but it never hurts to remind other people that he was a great second-round pick for the Broncos. So shout out to George Payton on a great draft selection on Javonte Williams. On the rise, I do have a tie between DreMont Jones and Justin Simmons. Rich, as you reiterated earlier about the fantastic play we saw from Simmons, I mean, that diving interception was a thing of beauty. And DreMont Jones was just, he was just unbelievable. And somebody in the comments pointed out that he could have had an interception if the ball would have gotten stuck on his helmet on that one play. But I'm pretty sure he didn't realize that the ball was going to hit him right square in the helmet. But he was just where he needed to be. He put pressure when he needed to put the pressure on. And he was amazing out on the field. So kudos to those two guys on their awesome gameplay. And hopefully we get to see more of it and that it wasn't just a flash in the pan going forward. For the bottom of the base for me is more obviously Deonte Spencer. I kind of almost cringe when I see him catch the ball because I'm like, please catch the ball. And then when he catches it, please don't fumble the ball because it almost feels like he tries to do too much. Sometimes you've seen it in previous years, Rich, where players try to kind of divert everybody to go one side and then the runner goes the other way. But that only works unless you have like some Tyreek Hill type of speed where you can literally cut all the way across the field faster than 100 other guys, charging at you. But even when you can't do that and you try to run in between the tackles, it becomes a liability and a pain. And I so heartily agree with you. I really do wish that they would put Mike Boone back there. Let's see how he can do in not just coming in for a couple plays or two like he did against Kansas City, but I believe that he would be a much better upgrade in that position over Deonte Spencer. And on the plane ride home for me, unfortunately, it's Tom McMahon again. I mean, as much as I'd like to pick on Deonte Spencer, he takes his training and his orders and his coaching from Tom McMahon. And the fact that Tom McMahon still has a job at this point in time, Rich, is still unbelievable. And I really do hope that whole thing comes to an end sooner than later for Broncos country, because we need some change in that department. We need a new special teams coordinator. And at this point, it's anybody but Tom McMahon.
Yeah, I think at some point you look to the depth on the roster, but then eventually when you keep on having the same issues over and over again, and I think this year we actually made some better efforts to improve some of the depth on our roster. Guys like Ford, for example, who stepped in and I thought played really well at the back end of that game, and some other guys. At some point, once you start improving that kind of back end of the roster, which typically forms your special teams unit, and you're still not doing really well in terms of both blocking, coverage, etc., you then need to then point some fingers at the special teams coordinator. Now, can we do better on the back end depth? Sure. All teams can, though. And frankly, other teams are doing better on special teams. So I think at this stage, I think Tom McMahon has kind of outlived his welcome here. And I think we need to start finding someone who can maybe start speaking to the players better to maybe drive a message home that Tom McMahon clearly isn't. And for those who are kind of questioning my comments earlier on Simmons, the one play that I would certainly point some figures to is if you go back and rewatch the touchdown play from Patrick Mahomes against Kansas City. That's kind of one of the things that kind of irks me a little bit about what happened. Is Simmons ran way over to the left when Mahomes was already moving right, and that just from someone who is a top tier safety, and I do believe Simmons is certainly within the upper tier of safeties. I just expect him to read plays a little bit better in some games, and I feel that he has struggled with some open field tackles, and I feel in plays like that he should be staying in his kind of side of the field or portion of the field a little bit more when plays like that occur. But like I said, against the Detroit Lions, he did all of the things right that he didn't do right against the Chiefs. So for me, I'm going to absolutely call that out because I think that shows marked improvement from my perspective. And I want to see more of that. So that's kind of where my perspective is on it and kind of my justification, if you will, as to why I said what I said. That being said, we have a pretty key game, in my opinion, coming up against the Cincinnati Bengals. And with that in mind, I wanted to thank very much for our featured guests for the Hot Five. And if we want to go ahead and roll that tape, there are some great things in this Hot Five.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rich and I proudly present to you this week's Bengals Hot Five.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is John Sheeran. I cover the Bengals for CincyJungle.com, and I co-host the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. You can catch us every Wednesday night at 8:30, including this week when we preview the upcoming game with the Denver Broncos. The 5 things that the Bengals need to do in order to beat the Broncos are as followed. They need more success in the passing game, and primarily this comes down to pass protection and just getting out early and having an effective passing game, starting with Joe Burrow and his receivers and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. They've done so much better this year. They've had much more success in winning games when they come out of the gate strong in terms of passing the ball. Obviously, running the ball is effective too, but this team kind of lives and dies by how effective they are just passing the ball and getting Jamar Chase involved kind of early. Number 2, you kind of lead into that with pass protection. They're having issues right now in pass blocking in general. Some of their best players, Jonah Williams and Quinn Spain, have not played up to their standards. They have injury issues at right tackle with Riley Reif right now. They've had to have a backup in Isaiah Prince play for him at right tackle, and they've had kind of a revolving door at right guard with Hakeem Adeniji. If those guys aren't playing at least average, passing game definitely dwindles and is less effective because they've run into some great pass rushes that kind of give them fits. Number 3, a solid pass rush starting with What are they going to do without Trey Hendrickson? Trey Hendrickson, unfortunately for the Bengals, hurt his back against the San Francisco 49ers. His availability is kind of up in the air at this point. He's going to be limited during practice this week because he suffered back spasms against the 49ers. But when Trey Hendrickson is not on for the Bengals, the pass rush is definitely not what it can be, and it's definitely less effective, and it makes the defense harder. It makes their jobs in the secondary and linebackers definitely harder. So if Trey Hendrickson can't go, they need to find a way to manufacture a pass rush to pressure Teddy Bridgewater against a pretty solid Broncos offensive line. Number 4, having the linebackers continue to play well. They've suffered an injury with Logan Wilson a couple weeks ago, and that prompted them to elevate Joe Bacci up from the practice squad. And Bacci has played very well next to Jermaine Pride, who's also played very well these past 2 weeks, but that level of play needs to stay consistent. Going up against the Broncos run game with Javonte Williams, who's incredible after contact and everything like that. So those guys need to continue to have good games. And number 5, these special team errors have to come to an end for the Bengals. They suffered 4 muffed kicks, including 2 muffed punts, turnovers against the 49ers with Darius Phillips back there. That's just giving points away. It's giving opportunities away. So many things have to go right for the Bengals in order to play consistent, solid football. They can't continue to make mistakes on special teams and just give possessions away to the Broncos and maybe even give away points like they did against the 49ers. If they can do those 5 things, they can find a way to try to beat a Denver Broncos team in the stadium that they don't have a lot of success, or at least haven't had a lot of success in recent memory. So passing game, pass rush, avoid special teams errors. Those are the big ones for me.
Yeah, shout out to our good special guest, Josh Sheenan. Hope I didn't mispronounce that. Thank you, John. Sorry, John Steen, for coming on and being our guest here today, Rich. And you know what? His points that he made, he's not wrong. And if you watch that San Francisco game like I did, then you'll understand that the Bengals are not the same team that they were, week 1, where they were just kind of steamrolling opponents. And we saw that they got almost destroyed by the Chargers 2 weeks ago, and the Niners game was a game that they should have won, but unfortunately they didn't. And they're coming into Denver a lot more beat up than their injury report will more than likely indicate this coming week. So I do believe that this game is a lot more winnable than when we read it on paper a couple months ago. So
they were one heck of a team a couple months ago. Like they had so fewer injuries, and wow, are they dangerous.
Yeah, but I mean, just like with the Lions here, Rich, they're not a team to sleep on. I'm not saying this is going to be a cakewalk by any means, because Jamar Chase is explosive. We know that if you give him an inch, he'll take a yard. He's that type of player. And Joe Burrow, the same thing. The Broncos defensive front, they have to put pressure on him just like they did against Jared Goff. They cannot let Burrow dance in the pocket. You cannot give his wide receivers time to get open and make plays. So that's the only really big concern I have going forward. Bradley Chubb, I don't know if he was on a snap count against the Lions, but I don't think that he was as good as he could have been, especially with Malik Reed being out with, I think he was on the COVID list. So it'll be interesting to see that if Malik Reed clears guidelines and he comes back, is that going to cut into Bradley Chubb's time? But Jonathan Cooper and Stephen Weatherly, the angry aviators, we like to call them here on the MHRT Network, they did a fantastic job in putting pressure. And even though Penei Sewell is one of the best offensive linemen in the league right now, they sure as hell gave him a run for his money on Sunday.
They did. And so some things that were said there in that Hot 5 segment that I think we need to take note of. So for one, some of the pass defense of the Bengals has been suspect for a couple weeks now. And that's why they've had such an ebbs and flow season. Some of the offensive lines they've gone against have been susceptible to their pass rush. And then therefore they've had a real hard time throwing down the field, and that's helped their secondary. Interior defensive line pressure will always help us secondary out in most games. Now, with regards to what we're going to have, I'd like to see a heavy dose. And this is, in my opinion, this is really going to be a true test for DreMont Jones. Can he own the left guard or the right guard of the Bengals, who is a rotational guy? can Draymond Jones show 2 games in a row stacked where he can have kind of that elevated game that we saw against the Detroit Lions? If he can, then I think this could be something for Draymond Jones to kind of start stacking game on top of game on top of game on top of game. And that's really what we've been missing from Draymond. Draymond has had a couple games where he's been good, and then he's had a small stretch where he's not been very good, and he's had a couple games where he's been better, and then he's kind of had those ebbs and flows where he hasn't really stacked games on top of each other. So I'd like to see him have another game like he had versus the Detroit Lions. I think it's absolutely unrealistic for him to have a game like he had against the Detroit Lions, but at least showing that he can kind of get home, get pressure, that kind of stuff, I think is what we can expect and hope for from a Draymond Jones against a depleted Bengals offensive line. And then on that same token, the other guy on the outside, can they get home? So is that Weatherly? Is that Malik Reed, if he can kind of have those 2 negative tests stacked on top of each other? Or is that going to be someone like a Jonathan Cooper on the other side? So we need that pressure from that one side of the line. And I actually just got a tweet through to Twitter about how we can stop Joe Mixon. That would be my answer on how you can stop Joe Mixon. If you can overload the one side of the line that is actually showing issues for the Bengals, you can force them to not run to one side of the field because you can get pressure on that side. And then you can start shifting run defense to the other side because you're able to get pressure on the one side and then penetration through the one side there. And then on the left-hand side of the offensive line of the Bengals is where you can start shifting your run protection, or in the center of the field where you can shift your run protection. So if you can actually overpower one side of the line consistently, it's pretty much over for the other team, because then they're going to have to adjust their game, and that will always typically end in your favor.
Yeah, and one of the things that made this victory really big here, Rich, was the fact that the Broncos offense took advantage of what the defense gave them,
Correct.
So that's another thing that the Broncos offense have to do when they get the ball. If the Broncos defense gives them a turnover, they have to put up points, not always have to settle for the field goal, unless it's absolutely necessary. But, also don't go for it if I know Vic Fangio sometimes likes to roll the dice, and sometimes it's okay, but other times it's kind of like, we should have just took the easy 3, type of thing. So, but that's basically what puts opposing teams in a tight bind, is when they have to play from behind, because then they have to start getting more desperate. And not only do you chew up clock, but you also force them to throw the ball, which is going to more than likely force them to make irrational plays or irrational calls where a turnover is more than likely to happen. So running the ball was a great way for the Broncos offense to get things rolling last week. And I think that that's also going to be a great thing to do going forward, because the next couple of teams up until we get up against Kansas City, and I'm saying that because we don't know which Kansas City team will be facing by then, but the next 3 teams, their run defense is not very, it's not like elite, so if guys like Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon can stay healthy and avoid injury, and our offensive line can keep opening those gaping holes or get those run pushes so our guys can go forward, and we can keep using the same formula, Rich, I think that the Broncos can easily secure a wild card spot. And then, obviously we'd have it'd be a different story of a different things to worry about for a different day. But if we keep continuing this formula, it would go a long way. But basically, we just need to break this chain, as as Big E pointed out, where the team is great one week, then we're bad the next, and we're good the next, and we're bad the next. Because these last 4 games, the Broncos cannot afford. There's no more safety net for the Broncos to be bad. They need to be good. They need to play high-end football, because they have to prove to any doubters out there that this team can get in, even if it's a wild card spot, that they can get into the playoffs, which is somewhere that we haven't been, Rich, for the last 6 years. The last 6 years, the Broncos have not been in the playoffs. So that drought has got to end this year.
Sure. So Big E and EJ and all the others that are making comments here in the chat, please keep it up. I love to see this banter back and forth in terms of comments and kind of a back and forth. That is spectacular. And for anyone else that has any questions for us, including anyone who's joining us as a Bengals fan, what do you want to know about our Denver Broncos? If you're not joining us live during the show, leave us a comment down below. I will do my very best to respond to you. I do check the comments on a regular basis to see if we have any that I can respond to. What do you think? What do you want to know about our Denver Broncos in terms of the types of things where we need to do to beat the Bengals, or you think the Bengals may have an advantage? Let's have that back and forth discussion. Now, with regards to your comments earlier, there are two things that we can do to really help our team. One is if we can run the ball, we really start chewing down the clock because that time keeps on ticking. We end up with longer drives. You end up keeping their opposing offense off the field. As long as you get 2-3 yards a clip, generally speaking, in terms of running the ball, you're really doing quite well when it comes to that kind of stuff. And in the last game against the Lions, we were averaging between 4.7 and 4.9 yards a clip, which will basically get you a first down pretty quickly every time. So that's really all you need to start churning down the clock and really getting those long extended drives. And then on the flip side of that, if, as I said earlier, if you can either overpower the entirety of your opposing team offensive line, or if you can at the very least completely overpower a single side of your opposing team's offensive line, then you basically take away one half of their rushing attack or passing attack, maybe even both. And you can really, really put them in a difficult position. And it is nearly impossible for a team to win a game when you completely overpower or win against one half of an offensive line, because you're changing their offensive game plan. Most teams want a complete even balance. They want to throw left, they want to throw right, they want to run left, they want to run right, and they want to run center. But if they cannot rush right or throw right because their quarterback can't get to that side of the field, then they're basically limiting one half of the field. And now you can focus everything else on the other side as long as that one part is winning their battles. And that's really a recipe for your success.
Yeah, and going back to the comment here from our good friend Steve, where he says teams will load the box if we can't throw or beat one-on-one matchups. Need a game from wideouts to keep defenses honest, and that's exactly my point here, Steve. And that's where Teddy Bridgewater, as a veteran, comes in. If he sees that they're starting to stack the box, he needs to call an audible and tell his wide receivers, "Hey, flat route, go out, or cut in, or slant, or deep pass, or what have you." That's the whole reason why they put him in, because that's something that Drew Lock last year wasn't able to do. His audibles weren't good, and when he tried to force plays down the field, they turned into interceptions. And that was the expectation going forward with Teddy Bridgewater, that he would actually be able to call a good audible and get the ball where he needed to be. Now, this past week, he was able to actually do that because he actually passed the ball to Noah Fant on a very good route. But after that, that was a great route. But unfortunately, we didn't see anything more towards Fant after that. I'm pretty sure he probably threw the ball at him a couple times, but it wasn't anywhere as crisp and good as it was on that particular play. So we need to see more plays like that. And hopefully, if doing this, not only will you tire out a defense, as Rich said, because you're chewing up clock, and linebackers obviously get tired the more they have to try to run in and stop a running play. But at the same time, when you tire out a defense, that opens your playbook more to get your, to open up more ideas and say, okay, they're tired. They're not going to keep running in it back and forth and keep up with your speedy wide receivers and your tall wide receivers at that in Patrick and Sutton. And where's the other comment here? Oh, yeah. From
Can we go back to Steve's? Can we go back to Steve's there? Just I want to quickly make a quick comment on that. So if we run the ball really well, if we truly run the ball really well, then you can wear down the opposing team's defense pretty successfully. This game is in Mile High, if I'm not mistaken. And
it is at Mile High.
Yeah, it is a Mile High. So the air is quite thin there. So if you really wear down that opposing defense and you're able to really run that ball right down the middle or in areas where you're going to start slowing them down. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that a lot of teams will then have to bring up a safety into the box in order to start slowing down your run game. And if you can still run the ball after they stack the box with that additional safety, then that's really when your play action pass, and that's where your deep passing routes can start develop. Because what you'd want to then start doing is you want to show run, make it look like it is truly going to be a run play. And then you can throw that massive, massive deep bomb down the field and have a guy like Tim Patrick, who rarely, if ever, drops the ball. He had one drop last game, but if he rarely drops the ball, really, if you're going to be honest. And a guy like Cortland Sutton really start to take the top off of that defense. And I realize that that's a cliche kind of statement to make, but then they have to start adjusting back, and then you run the ball again, and then they have to adjust it back again. So the whole point of doing something like running the ball and being able to run it successfully forces the other team to adapt to you. And then at that point there, you're in control of the game, because then you can either show run and then pass. And then when they then try to stop the run, then you pass again. And then they kind of then play the pass, and then you run. So you really then start dictating the game.
Yeah, and our good friend Johnny Pocky here saying, Rich, can we please rescind Vic Fangio's challenge privileges? Unfortunately not, my friend. Vic Fangio still has up to 12, a possible 12 times to try to win a challenge before the season's over. And that's 12 because he has to win 2 challenges to get an extra one for that for said game. So but let's not forget, Rich, he should have won that challenge against Kansas City 2 weeks ago.
I agree.
So they robbed
that Kelsey
him
play
of
was a catch. That Kelsey play was a catch. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was a catch and fumble.
Yeah.
We even had support from the head coach from the Titans, Mike Vrabel. So it's not just us seeing it through orange-colored glasses, as we like to say around here. It was actually
right.
Broncos being robbed. But then again, nothing new.
Now, with regards to this comment, I'm not certain that this is necessarily coming from Fangio. You have to remember that Fangio's getting people shouting in his ear, challenge the play, challenge the play. There's no way Fangio's just on a whim throwing the challenge flag. Now, maybe in some cases he is. However, I heard recently on another podcast that another thing with regards to challenges is if you know that a player that you have is injured or maybe not 100%, and you're trying to delay the game a little bit intentionally, one of the ways of doing that is throwing a challenge flag on a play, even though you know you're going to lose. Because then you get that extended timeout to try and get that player right, or at least well enough to get back onto the field. So there's a few other considerations to factor into some of the challenges. Now, I'm not going to lie. A few of the challenges have been absolutely hot garbage. So I get it. Like, I completely understand the comment there. However, there's a few other considerations to factor into this where are we intentionally trying to delay the game so we can make some adjustments? Are we leveraging challenges as another means of just, taking a timeout at an opportune time in the game to give ourselves more time to plan or do certain things? These are all factors to kind of, include in some of our critique. So who knows?
Yeah. So Rich is totally right. Yeah, guys have to remember that somebody in Vic Fangio's headset is telling him, hey, challenge the play. But then again, to counteract that point, I'm pretty sure Vic Fangio probably is asking somebody like, hey, what do you guys think? Or, hey, can you guys check that play? So while there is somebody in his headset saying challenge it, I'm pretty sure Vic is the one that's probably calling for a quick review upstairs before the next play is snapped and they have a chance to throw the flag. So I believe the fault there is 50-50. I would say 50 on Fangio and 50 on whoever the hell is yelling in Fangio's ear. Like, yeah, that's a challenge. You'll more than likely win it. So, but unfortunately for Denver, winning challenges is not our best forte right now.
No. Quick question for you. What do you think is the biggest thing that we're going to have to face against the Bengals this week?
I would probably have to say, and I have to agree with Boggins in terms of Joe Mixon, because I know Kenny Young is in the concussion protocol currently. So hopefully he clears that, because as we've seen, the guys behind Young and Baron Browning, they're not as good caliber players as those two are. And a guy like Joe Mixon will more than hopefully not just run through those guys, but maybe break their ankles or just find a way to get past them, because Joe Mixon is a really speedy running back.
He's a good back.
So and while Jamar Chase is a pretty quick wide receiver, even in his rookie year, I have faith in guys like Callahan and Darby played really good football this past week. Just as long as it's not Fuller back there in coverage, I think our secondary will be fine in trying to keep Boyd and Higgins and their wide receivers at bay. But I would probably have to say that, Joe Mixon will more than likely, if Kenny Young plays, Joe Mixon won't be as big of an issue. But if he doesn't play, then I can see the Broncos trying to stack the box in certain areas to try to limit the damage done by their running backs. And that kind of scares me because when you stack the box, obviously a speedy wide receiver like Jamar Chase can get open pretty quick.
I have to agree. I think the Cincinnati Bengals running game is really our biggest concern. We've seen several teams run on us in the last few games. Vic Fangio even called it out against the Detroit Lions. And frankly, if you're going to look at the Detroit Lions, they ran pretty heavy on us too. Now, the Detroit Lions are a pretty I think so many people have overlooked the Lions because their record isn't great. They've done really, really well overall this year in terms of keeping games super close. And I think that after they make a few tweaks to the roster, I think you're going to be pretty surprised at how well they do. So I think that your brother's going to be pretty pleased in about a year or two. Now, I ask your brother to just bear with it because it looks like they're building their team the right way. So, hold on, hold tight, and hopefully they start, bouncing back a little bit. But I think what we can take away from that Detroit Lions game is that we need to maybe shift our mentality and really play the run a little bit better, because if Cincy runs the way that they did if Cincy runs the way that Detroit ran against us, Cincy has a far more aggressive, and they have that AFC North style offensive line that's used to playing those cold weather games. We have some issues. And if they can run like that against us, they've been able to do some pretty big damage against some of their AFC North foes. That AFC North group, I've traveled most of those states. They remind me a lot of Canada in terms of the grit that they have in those style of states. And we just need to be careful. We truly need to be careful, because if we let the Bengals run all over us, then we will then be forced to play to Cincinnati's game plan. And then they will start running play action passes. Joe Burrow is a very good quarterback, and we cannot forget that he is a very, very good quarterback. And when you start adding in play action passes into a quarterback's game like that by allowing them to run all over you, it is not going to be a good day for us if we allow that to happen.
Very well said, my friend. But unfortunately, guys, we're getting towards the end of the show. So unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap things up here. Guys, thank you guys so much for joining us live here in the chat. Everybody from Biggie Bronco to Steve to the boss Mundungus. I know John was here. I don't know if I could read that right. Eileen, or I think that's Eileen. Thank you so much. And unfortunately, anybody whose name I'm missing, I can't think off the top of my head. Thank you guys so much for watching and commenting, asking us questions. We do hope that you guys, as Biggie Bronco said, that you liked today's show. And if you did, guys, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel so you get live notifications of when you go live. And to tell you guys why, don't forget to ring that bell so you get those live notifications. Thank you, Rich. And just to remind you guys why you should subscribe to the MHRT Network. Well, we have this show, the Broncos Talk, with myself and Rich, that goes live every single Tuesday at 7654. We also have the flagship show, the MHRT Podcast, which goes live every Thursday at 7654 with myself, the boss Mundungus, Mr. Boggins, who you saw make a guest appearance here earlier tonight, and as well as Mr. Glenn Hauser, who also made a guest appearance here tonight. So, guys, thank you guys so much for stopping by. I know you guys are busy. And also we have on Fridays, we have the Nothing Rhymes with Orange and Blue podcast with our good friend Johnny Baki here, who mispronounced or misspelled. It's called the Mike High Five now. It's not the Mile High Five anymore. It's the Mike High Five. So make sure you guys.
We want this in the stadium, please.
So make sure you guys tune in on Fridays to see him and his co-host Isaiah as they break down any and all current Broncos news leading up to the week. And of course, we have the pregame show, which is called The Neighborhood, that airs just before every single Broncos game. Guys, there's only 4 weeks left in the season, and you'll be lucky to get any more should the Broncos make the playoffs. So consider that a gift, maybe a late Christmas gift, but it's a gift all around. So make sure you guys don't miss out on any of the pregame show content that we put out there, because there's always special guests. There's always stuff to talk about just before every pregame show. It's a great way to get hyped up before the game. So with that being said, guys, we're going to head on out of here. But before we do, Rich, we're going to do everybody's favorite part of the show. They do it on every single one of the shows. Rich, are you ready?
Yes.
Here we go. My high five. Woo! Guys, thank you so much. For Rich, I'm Adon. Have a good night, guys.
Go Broncos.
Go Broncos. And as always, hasta luego.